Hello and welcome back to our newest book review. Today we're going to be discussing a book which I've been very excited to read and to discuss. It's been a long time coming with the fact that I've been very slow at the reading, but it is also because of the fact that lots of stuff has been going on within my home and personal life. However, enough about that. Let's get to the book. We are going to be discussing today a wonderful book called A Day of Fallen Night by the very amazing Samantha Shannon. This is the second book within her Roots of Chaos series, though this is a prequel to the first book, which is called The Priory of the Orange Tree, which was first published in 2019. This book has been something I've been very excited to read since I found out about its release in 2022. Why? Well, this is because The Priory of the Orange Tree was the first book that I read following finishing university. This was a time where I really didn't have much time for reading, I didn't have the energy for reading, but having picked up The Priory of the Orange Tree following the completion of uni, I was enthralled with it. This book was not only a great read, it was also one that got me out of my reading slump and was something that I very much refound my passion for reading with. It was very exciting because of the fact that it was fantasy, full of so much mystery and excitement, which I cannot wait to discuss as it goes through with this next book. Unfortunately, there has been a delay with finishing this book, and that is mainly due to personal life things, as I've said. However, my main aim with The Day of Fallen Night is the fact that I really wanted to finish it before Comic-Con. So I went to Comic-Con in London in May this year, and let me tell you, it was an amazing time. Now, my main aim for finishing this book before Comic-Con was the fact that Samantha Shannon was there. And boy, let me tell you, it was not disappointing with the fact that I got to meet her. So if we have a quick look at this book, which we'll do in just a second, I was very lucky in the sense of I pre-ordered this book and it came with a very lovely signature at the front of this inside of the cover, which it's freaking pretty as heck, which I don't blame because it's Samantha Shannon's book. However, I did also get to meet Samantha Shannon, and I was very worried about meeting her due to the fact of I hadn't actually finished this book at the time at Comic-Con. I was about 100 pages left to actually read before finishing, and I thought if she spoke about the book too in depth at her panel, or if she asked me a question about the book, I would be very concerned. However, that did not happen, and instead I got to meet her, and I got a very wonderful... I can't find where it is. Oh my gosh. Where is it? It's here, isn't it? No, I didn't get this one signed. That's my bad. This one we did not get signed because it was already signed at the front technically. So I did get my copy of The Priory of the Orange Tree signed instead, to which I got this very lovely little thing from her. I'm just going to remove the jacket because I know myself, I will damage it otherwise. Yeah, we got a very lovely signed and very sweet message from Samantha Shannon, which says, "To Carl, you are your own shield," and her signature down the bottom there, which I freaking adore. It was a super sweet quote, and the most wholesome thing was I actually got to speak to her and say to her that she got me out of my reading slump, which she seemed to really appreciate hearing, and it was super sweet. Anyway, enough about that. We are going to move on to what the book is actually about. So it's a good question. There is so much about this book. It's a very daunting book with how big and how powerful the book is. However, in short, it's about a world where there once was a powerful Ryron that came out and caused chaos throughout the lands. However, in this story, these creatures return to cause chaos, fear, and destruction throughout the world, while we follow several characters' life in the attempt to both survive and help stop the impending doom, which seems to be surfacing throughout the book. Now, we're going to go slightly further into what the book entails, and this may involve some spoilers here, so do be aware if you haven't read the book or you are planning to read the book and do not want spoilers, maybe skip this chapter and move on to the next part. If not, don't worry, we'll try and keep it as unspoilery as we can, but either way, there will be some in this point. So the story generally follows 4 protagonists, 3 females and 1 male protagonist throughout this, and it's all as an adventure through this world and face their own hardships and challenges that you might face within a world of a court or within kind of olden historical times. They've lived in a world where its history is very rich and well established within the book. Due to this, we are aware of a time before the book is set with which a creature is known as the Nameless One was released from the Dreadmount, which is a volcano. I couldn't quite say where it is. My geography in real life as well as within the books is definitely not a great thing. But this Nameless One had sought to cause the destruction of the world as they knew it, along with causing a deadly plague which afflicted the world. The first creature was slain, and depending on which character you were reading, you may have different views on how the creature was slain or what kind of led up to the destruction of this creature. It's a very, very good way that Samantha Shannon has managed to make each character unique, give them their own history and personality and views within a world that is hers, that she has created, and it works absolutely wonderfully. However, due to the split in what has happened in the past, there is a split between the areas of the kingdom. So within one, there is a side of the world which believes in very much magic is bad and dangerous and it shouldn't be used. It's the problem that has caused a lot of the summoning of the Wyrens. And then there's the other side where they believe in the magic. They believe it's there to help support, help survive and protect them from when the Wyrens attack again. Anyway, the main premise of this book itself is that some new creatures, some more Wyverns, have returned to wreak havoc and destroy the world. And we have the difficulty part in the fact that part of the world believes that a certain person must stay alive to shield the Nameless One from returning. Where you've got another side of the world where they're like, actually, we need to fight and destroy these, much like who they kind of worship and acknowledge does. And this creates a really, really interesting dynamic as you start going through. We do also have some other characters who start exploring through the world and have, within their own areas, expertise and connections to other mythical creatures, aka dragons, which, you know, who doesn't love a good dragon in a book? And this creates a really, really interesting element of you've got the people that absolutely fear wyverns, dragons, magic. You've got the people that like magic but don't necessarily know about dragons existing and things like this. And it makes it really, really intriguing. Now, the next part that we're going to discuss is about the characters. So, as I've already mentioned, there are 4 main characters within the story. The first character we shall talk about is Glorian. Glorian is about a 16 to 18 years old within this book series, and she very much is the Queen of Inns, so the Queen of one part of the world. She is a character who absolutely delights me. She is very courageous, she's very caring, she's sweet, she's endearing, yet she's very worried about filling the shoes that she feels she has to have. She's seen her mother be queen, she's seen what she does and how she ruled the kingdom, and she knows she's got really, really big shoes to fill. However, will Glorian be able to live up to this? We don't know. And it's a very interesting, complex story with her because you don't quite know what way she's going to go. Is she going to be the strong queen that you hope and root for? Or is she going to be the girl that kind of runs and shies away from everything? It's a really interesting dynamic to start thinking about, particularly when you see how her parents are a queen of Inns who got married to a king of the north, who very much are 2 very different characters and very much can feed very differently into Queen Glorian. However, I'm not going to say too much because of spoilers. It is a very interesting dynamic, the way that they work it in and weave out and make her become this very well-rounded character and see what she actually does throughout this adventure. Our next character that we are going to discuss is Wolf, and Wolf is probably another one of my absolute favourite characters. Wolf lived within the same country as Glorian, though he went off to the north to work for the king. He became one of his most admirable men and was working towards getting a knighthood. He has a very, very complex background of a history. He is this character that is filled and surrounded by mystery, not because of what he wants to do or what his actions and thoughts are, but because of some of the other myths that are surrounding the land. There's very much a connotation that he might be a witch, and throughout the book, this can be very, very highly suggested. As to whether this is true or not, I'm not going to say. It's for you to find out. You've got to read the book. But there are so much possibilities and so many questions that his characters and his chapters bring about. Not only that, but you find out he is a very, very strong fighter. He is in some of the best fight scenes that I have read within these books. And not only is he within them, he also shows a really kind, gentle, and I want to say spiritual, but not quite spiritual, more nurturing nature. And he very much is all about protecting those who can't help themselves, and preventing any harm. He very much is one of them people that is, if he is the problem, he wants to lock or remove himself away from everything. And it makes you really feel for this character. The next character we're going to be talking about is Tuva. I'm probably butchering these names. If anyone knows me, I can't really pronounce names very well. But Tuva is a woman who is in around her 50s. She is, again, a wonderful character. However, her chapters weren't necessarily something that rang or called to me as well as some of the other characters. She is a wonderfully skilled mage who is part of the Priory, which is the Orange Tree, which we learn about within, obviously, the Priory of the Orange Tree. She is a character who is set to fight against Wyverns and fight against any of these kind of creatures that might come back from the Dreadmount. There's been a time of absolute peace and solace. These people haven't necessarily had to do this fighting, but they have trained all their lives to be ready for it. And because of that, they are these fierce warriors that go out and will protect the land. However, Tuvia has got some other background to her. She's got some mysteries that have happened from her past regarding past children. She's got her current child who seems to be having difficulties in the sense of fitting into where they live currently. And it makes for a really difficult time for Tuvia to know whether she should keep going kind of with her cause, with what she's been raised and with what she knows, or whether she needs to start trying to change her way of thinking to help support her child so that they can have the best life. And it does make for some really interesting chapters. It does make for some really interesting, compelling reading as well. But for me, it didn't quite grab me as much as some of the other chapters did with some of the other characters. Our final character that we will be talking about is Demai. Demai is an absolute character who I took a bit of time warming to. She's at first this, what's called a god singer, so a bit of a religious character who's there to give praise to their gods. And within the world of Demai, their gods are the dragons. And, you know, dragons, as I said, always a wonderful, fantastic thing. From having read The Priory of the Orange Tree, I kind of felt dragons might come into this book, as it is a big part within Priory of the Orange Tree. However, I wasn't fully sure. This being said, Demai very much starts off as this bit of a mystery character, bit of a wanting to do the right thing and aiming to get like the highest rank she can within the world that she is in. But soon enough, we find out that that is obviously not going to be the case, and she is thrown into a whole different path, a whole other array of story that both myself and the character never expected to happen. There are some other twists and turns that happen here, and they do make things really, really powerful. And eventually, as we start discovering and looking at the way she actually develops this world and develops in herself as a character, it is absolutely phenomenal. I very much enjoyed reading the changes. I very much enjoyed reading the way that we developed these characters so that she could blossom into the great ruler, the great leadership character that she is for her kind of clan and area. And it made for a wonderful, wonderful time and really made me feel for her, particularly towards the end of the book as well, which, again, I won't go too much detail, but there are some many, many happenings that shocked me and I was not expecting. So do be prepared for a rollercoaster ride, particularly through her chapters as well. So the next part that I'd like to talk about within this book is romance. Now, romance is something which is very prominent in books and is such a focal point that it takes away from the story itself, with many books focusing on the relationship between the protagonist and other characters. However, A Day of Fallen Night doesn't do this, and it's fantastic that it doesn't. I am personally sick of reading books where it's very much forced upon you of going, have this romance, have this romance, have this romance, these characters are going to fall in love, and you sit there and you're like, that's great, I don't mind romance, but where's the action? Where's the natural feel for it rather than it feeling forced and just like thrust upon you? However, A Day of Fallen Night works well at intertwining romance relationships as if they naturally occurred in real life. Some of the relationships are already established, some develop throughout the story, and some are present but maybe between the lines for some time. This makes the world feel dynamic, feel natural, and feel like it is within our world we live in ourselves. And that is a really, really great thing. This also means that Samantha Shannon has been great at including representation within her books for the LGBTQA plus communities, and in such a natural way. There are characters who begin in obvious relationships which you know are gay, while some come as a surprise or hinted. There are other characters who you feel swing one way but then learn they swing another. It's a real good fantasy story to include this kind of diversity or help normalise it. As it is often discussed with literature, particularly historical literature, it should be accurate to the time it's set. But there is nothing to say that people should not and would not have been LGBTQA+ within these time periods. And for Samantha to have incorporated it so smoothly, so naturally, is a real additional charm to her books. And she does do it in this really charming way, in the sense of you'll read it and all of a sudden, bam, here is this scene that you can feel the build-up happening at one point, and it just fits. It fits, it feels natural, it feels like the proper flow of the book, it feels like where the progression would be. And it worked so wonderfully and magically well that I really appreciate it, because it isn't me sitting there going, oh god, they're gonna fall in love. It's you sitting there and you're entwined with everything else that's going on, and all of a sudden there's, bam, here's your romance scene. Take that moment to chill back and relax and recuperate as your characters are doing so in that scene, and just recover. Have that time of bliss and of that happiness. And for this book, for how serious it can be, for how some of the actual tones are, that romance side of it works superbly well. So you've heard a lot of what the book includes. As to how I personally feel about the book, well, it's overall an amazing and wonderfully fun and colourful book. It contains a well thought out world with a complex history, and characters which constantly make you think, along with trying to work out what is going to happen or how it links to what has happened. Depending on how you read this series, it can also play a part in trying to link connections to the other book, which I found super fun. Like trying to think how some of these characters would have led into what happens within the future of the book, or future of the book series within Priory of the Orange Tree is really interesting. Particularly for me, some of the history parts I felt maybe didn't quite line up, or maybe there just wasn't quite as good records back then. I don't know. That's something that is, as much as it was a bit of a pain, it was super fun sitting there to ponder about. I did, however, have a frustration with the book, and many other books like it. And this is swapping between characters. This is something that is done quite often now, and I struggle with this due to characters having got a really interesting point and being super interested in what happens next. However, we do sadly then move on to the next character. While this is a great way to keep the narrative moving and seeing what is happening at current times in other locations, the frustration is still present. Now, I could skip these chapters and go back and read them, however doing this would mean spoiling things, and as things develop and unfold for each of the characters. This was a massive thing, because we sit there and I'll have chapters where I'm like, oh my god, I want to read more about you, Wolf, and what you're doing on your adventures at the moment. But we stop within about 5 pages, and all of a sudden we're back over to, say, Tuvia or Glorian, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? It is such a shame, but it works so well, and Samantha Shannon fits it in again so naturally because of the way these storylines intercross, the way they link, or the way that you know something's happening here, but you've also got in the back of your head, actually, but this might be happening here. And Samantha Shannon does it in such a wonderful, easy flowing, natural way that we just absolutely adore. I did love how the book ended, the way the story came to its conclusion, which was not in quite such a big epic and neat ending as Priory of the Orange Tree, yet it was still enticing and definitely different ending to what I would expect. This made it feel like a unique book and an interesting storytelling method from Samantha Shannon. Overall, I would rate this book a 5 out of 5 due to how in-depth it is and how much I've fallen in love with these characters. This world and the stories within which Samantha Shannon has created and shared. I know there is a frustration with the characters changing, however there is something happening more and more now. It's also a powerful book for simple, effective and well done representation for people within the LGBTQA+ communities. while at the same time, it's not a forced romance book with it being the central forced focus points within the story, which is something I feel happens too often these days. It's definitely something that I struggle with, but Samantha Shannon has done it absolutely wonderfully. Well, thanks all for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this review of A Day of Fallen Night, and if you haven't already, definitely go check it out along with its sequel book, The Priory of the Orange Tree. If you've read, drop in the comments below what you thought. Who was your favourite character and what was your favourite part? Otherwise, tell me what you are currently reading or what your next read is going to be. For me, I'll see you next time when we are reviewing the very wonderful book which I've picked up called Scythe. You guys have a very wonderful day, stay your magical selves, and I'll catch you soon. Bye bye!